The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
How you doing, everyone? Kerwin Gaines here, back on the agenda. We're excited about it. We're glad that you're back joining us yet again. This season has been incredible. I'm very proud of all of us here at DETV, ensuring that we have guests that pique your interest and ensure that your issues are being talked about and brought up on the agenda. Tonight, no difference. We have Mr. Charlie Copeland. A lot of you know him from around town and as a very prominent Delawarean and someone who understands Dover quite well as being a person that was down there making things happen for you and your community. But he's also a Republican. A lot of you all feel that the agenda is biased to one side or another and we don't bring in enough of the right. Well, we have the right one tonight. So he's going to talk to us about Project 2025 and some of the questions and concerns that I have, some of the questions and concerns that I know that you have, as well as education in the state of Delaware. And if you're paying attention, Monday was a big day for the Christina School District. So we're going to talk about that and so much more tonight. Welcome, Mr. Cope.
Kerwin, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here on the show. You're a first timer. We'll try to be gentle so you come back again and see us.
It's all good.
We appreciate you. Tell us, before we get started and all this other stuff, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the Caesar Rodney Foundation.
Yeah, so the Caesar Rodney Institute.
Excuse me.
No worries. CaesarRodney.org, CaesarRodney.org. And we're a center-right, Delaware-based, Delaware-focused think tank. So we try to generate policy ideas and thoughts about what's going on in Delaware politically and policy-wise from a center-right perspective. And so we've got four the divisions, or if you will. I head up the Economics Center and Government Transparency, and then we've got an Education Center, a Healthcare Center, and an Environmental and Energy Policy Center.
Love it, love it. So we don't have a lot of time, so I want to dig into this as much as we can. Education is something that's scaring me right now. I want to be honest with you. Not only how the information, how the education is getting to the students, making sure that it's effective, but also from the financial part, it's scaring me. The overall curriculum is scaring me, and the administration of education is scaring me. Not just from a Democratic side, not just from a Republican side, but I'm going to start off for the state of Delaware side. You know, as a parent and someone who has 3 kids in the educational system here in Delaware, I think it's something that's gotten a little out of hand.
Sure, yeah. I agree with you. I think that our education system, and I want to make sure I focus on the word system very, very importantly, because it's not a people issue. I think that the vast majority of our teachers are good teachers, but they are in a system that doesn't allow them to perform at their highest level. And there are some teachers that should be removed, and it's a system that keeps those teachers there. They've got protections. And so if you're an excellent 4th grade teacher, but the teacher that's in 3rd grade is not particularly good, you've got a much, much heavier lift than you should. And so every year counts to the next year. And if you don't have good quality teachers that are able to do what they are trained to do, your education eventually falls apart. And in the state of Delaware, we've got around 120 schools, and about 20 of those schools have single-digit proficiency in math and or English and language arts. That's single digit. In other words, 9 out of 10 students are not proficient. We're not talking about excellent. We're not talking about great. We're not talking about strong. We're talking about just the minimum. 9 out of 10 are not proficient. What kind of jobs are they going to get? There's a reason why Delaware's economy has suffered 7 recessions in the last 20 years when the country's only had 2, and why last year Delaware was the worst performing economy in the nation, the only state that had a declining economy. I think a lot of that comes back to the fact that we have done such a poor job in our education system that the employment base is difficult for employers to say, oh yeah, I want to move there. And this is a system problem, our education system.
So the problem that I'm having with the educational system starts from, I would say, from a legislative standpoint. I had the pleasure of facilitating the gubernatorial debates maybe about a month ago. And I had the pleasure of talking to all the candidates on numerous occasions. And this isn't, from Michael Ramone to Matt Meyer and so on, Colin and all those other folks. But I keep hearing the same thing in regards to education with them. And I'm not hearing about some massive sweeping change.
Yeah.
I hear how everybody's pissed and it's election season and they're standing on their stumps. And this is on both parties, but I'm not hearing about the systemic change that needs to occur within education.
Absolutely right, and that is one of the things that frustrates me. But like you said, it's on both sides. I mean, that we have not implemented public policies, education policies, to help improve education. We've done things like, let's throw reading specialists in all the schools. Let's throw math specialists in all the schools. And that all sounds great, but what if what the school really needs is mental health counselors? Or what the school really needs is a community outreach person to go talk to various families. Or I don't know if you saw, but our absenteeism, truancy, is 23%. One out of 4 kids.
Right.
1 out of 4. And they say, but studies show it leads to crime and homelessness and drugs. Well, no kidding. We don't need scientists to tell us that a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old on the street all day long, every day, because missing one day is not truancy.
Right.
You've got a problem, and it's because our schools are not delivering an educational product or service that the students value, that the parents are valuing, that the teachers are valuing, and we will continue to fritter around the edges, just like we have for decades. When I was in the Senate, the state Senate, the early 2000s, so a long time ago, and the only committee I asked for was the Education Committee because we needed to do something about it then. Well, that was 15 years ago. So we've already graduated 15 years of young people into our communities that are ill-prepared to work in artificial intelligence technologies and AI and things like that we're going to need to be competitive in the future.
Briefly, Christina School District ousted their superintendent Monday, and it seems as though the district is just in a mess right now. They are a very expensive district, and they have a referendum coming up in February, I think it is, to ask for even more money for failing results. I don't know. That's where I stand from my side. I'm very interested to know where you stand from your side.
The only thing I will disagree with in what you just said was that they seem to be a mess right now. The Christina School District has been a mess for decades.
Okay.
And there have been hundreds, thousands of young people that have been ill-served and tens of millions, if not $1 billion, spent over that period of time on this poor performance. I mean, there was a business, Astropower, that went out of business and they had to build a big corporate headquarters. Well, the Christina School District bought that building. It had a lovely, they spent all this money and then couldn't turn it into a school. It was a boondoggle, and that was 15, 20 years ago. And so going after the current superintendent, I don't know enough about the internal politics to say whether that was a good idea or a bad idea, but I would submit that the entire Christina School District has been in failure mode for decades, and this is part of the system, right? The way the state has grown our education system, starting from pre-busing, and even go before that when we had sort of a dual set of systems. But we put together 4 consolidated school districts in northern Newcastle County: Red Clay, Brandywine, Christina, and Colonial. And then all the other districts we left alone. So the other ones are all sort of, you have Smyrna or Woodbridge or Cape Henlopen. And in those districts, people look at their schools and they say,
one curriculum, one idea.
And those were my neighborhood schools, and so I don't want to blow that apart. We're up here. For a long period of time, Christina, and I don't believe it's the case anymore, there were only 4 districts in the country that had non-contiguous schools. In other words, the land that the school district took up, there was a gap where another district was there, and then so when
picked up again,
right. So the city portion that Christina had was not contiguous to the rest of the district. Only one of the 4 in the country. What a terrible idea. When a parent wants to go see their kid at school and they got to go from Wilmington to Newark or Newark to Wilmington across some other school district to go see their kid. I mean, just the hard difficulty that gives to a family.
But Christina, I mean, let's be honest. Christina used to be one of the best school districts in the state. There was a time when that occurred, when there was a regime in there that knew education, knew how to get things done. My question, Charlie, is, and I'm not putting this on you,
Sure.
but because it's just not them, how do you go from greatness to where they are now? What the hell happened?
There are a couple of things. One, leadership matters. And our school districts are run on a political basis, not on a leadership basis. And you need good leaders. And you need good leaders in the schools themselves, the principals. But principals are not promoted to that spot because they're good leaders. They're usually, not 100%, but usually promoted to that spot because they're good administrators or bureaucrats. Those aren't the people that you want inspiring your children and inspiring their teachers to go above and beyond. So the leadership issue. The other piece is that it is a system problem, again, in that the political piece of it. I will tell you right here and now that the Wilmington Consortium, if you want accountability, I'm going to put you in charge and I'm going to hold you accountable. If you don't perform, we'll get you out somebody else in, right? But I've got to give you the authority to make decisions and fire people, hire people, change curriculums, this kind of stuff. The Wilmington Collaborative, I have Christina in here, I have Red Clay in here, I have Brandywine in here. Nobody has authority. Nobody has accountability. Remember when I-95 or 495 separated a few years back? Well, the city of Wilmington, DENREC, and DelDOT all had authority. So everyone thought, oh, well, they're doing it. Oh, they're doing it. They're doing it. And they all passed the buck. That's what's going to happen here. And that's what's happened in Christina. That's frankly what's happening in Brandywine and Red Clay. The southern districts are a little different because, again, they're sort of more traditional around their towns or what have you. But even them, they're not performing above and beyond. I mean, the state in Delaware as a whole ranks somewhere around 45th, 46th.
But when do we start to look at the Department of Education and hold them accountable to some of this?
Absolutely. And what code over time, what laws have been passed over time has turned them really into a sort of bureaucratic paper-pushing organization.
Paper-pushing, it seems to me like it's more of a grant organization.
I tell you, I would much rather, here's the number of students in the districts. Here's the amount of money we got. We take the number of the money divided by the students, and then you make some adjustments for special needs or English as a second language, this kind of stuff, and say, okay, your family's getting $24,000 to spend on your schooling. If you spend it at a district school, you get X. If you spend it somewhere else, and then we say to the Department of Education, and we're doing this. Actually, the community education building is doing this, and it's having some pretty interesting results in that they've hired basically. People whose job is to be the mentor for the student and say, okay, you're in 3rd grade right now. Where are we having problems? And how do we make sure you're getting to 5th grade ready to learn in 5th grade? What do we need to do? And you've got an advocate for the student. And when I was growing up and when my kids were growing up, we had means, we went to private schools. I was the advocate. My wife was the advocate. And we could go and talk to the teacher anytime we wanted to. Imagine if the Department of Education, instead of pushing paper, distributed it out to the school districts and acted as advocates.
But then it sounds like you're turning them into social workers, like you're turning the educational system into, a social work thing. Well, they're having trouble with this, so let's put a social worker on it and push them through school.
I would argue that's slightly different, and that is because the system has become so complicated today. I mean, even when my kids were getting ready to go to college, how do you fill the forms out and who do you take the tests and what time are the tests and all. I mean, it's pretty complicated. Yeah. And that's just trying to go to college once you've made it through everything else. And so to have somebody who's there, and so if you want to call it social worker, okay, but I think it's more a matter of how do I help this student navigate a very complicated system and allow the teachers, because now I'm not just regulating and making them fill out forms for the purposes of filling out forms, let the teachers actually teach, and then and we should be testing with growth-focused tests at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, the end of the year, so we can see where students are performing or lagging and adjust their educational profile as a result of that. There's nothing wrong with knowing, okay, this student is falling behind on reading, and so I need to give them more time in reading, and therefore I work with the reading instructor or whomever, or maybe this person's really advanced in math, and maybe what we're doing in class here today isn't helping them, and now they're being held back because they're smarter than where we are in that spill. And we don't do that as a system.
So let me jump subjects with you, okay? Put your seatbelt on. So you talked about school choice. You talked about having money set aside. Personally, I think that kind of sucks out of our current system and leaves public schools in the lurch. It turns them into charter, what have you. But also that is what has been mentioned in Project 2025, that needs to be mandatory, where everyone has a choice. You can choose schools and choose your funding to go to that school. Let's talk a little bit about Project 2025. Let's kind of ease into it.
Sure.
Some people don't know what it is, and basically it comes from a think tank, from the Heritage Foundation, which is a very, I wouldn't say prominent think tank, but they are
They're
very
prominent
conservative.
on the right.
They're prominent on the right.
Sure
I'll give you that. And working in defense for 20-some years, I deal with think tank white papers a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are out there. I think that's fair.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't disagree.
Oh, and they're not meant to be adopted 100%. I think they're hoped that they were adopted 100%, but they're not meant to. They are for, I would say, decision makers to kind of read, peruse, and begin to have thoughts on something. Some folks, there's generations that don't understand what think tanks are. That's why I'm explaining that to them. And they don't understand about the ideas that are based. But this study was facilitated by folks that worked for President Trump prior to this, right? They understand him. They understand that in his first reign of presidency, there was a lot of, what do we do? How are we going to do this? We weren't really expecting this. Now we do this. This eliminates that. This is telling him about what, if in fact he were to win, this is what the map that we think we should follow. President Trump has said in several campaign speeches, hey, look, this isn't me, so on and so forth. I don't buy all of that, but I understand he's probably going to say that anyway. God forbid the truth, but that's just me. So interested to know your thoughts. We'll take it in small bites, but perusing, I don't know if you read all 900 pages of it.
I did not.
But, from what you have read, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, a think tank comes up with policy ideas, and they hire people or people, and so, I write about the economy, and I'm very much a free market guy, and so when I write something about economics, it's going to start from that basis. Now, by the way, free markets don't work in every scenario, and so the question is then, how do you bring some free market ideas to whatever you're trying to solve? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that's the idea. You're generating ideas, you're putting them out there, and some of them wind up being a little out there. Matter of fact, the first healthcare mandate where everybody had to buy insurance that then became Hillary Care and then was not in the Obama, although it sort of was. That actually came out of the Heritage Foundation in the early 90s. And then all of a sudden they realized, we're mandating people have to do something, and that's not a conservative principle, so let's back off of that. So they do come up with ideas that all of a sudden may make it mainstream some other way. So looking through it, I don't know that I think that the issue around the Project 2025 is so much the mandate for change, which is the 900-page manual. It's the other three pieces of it, which is probably another step in a think tank that maybe other places haven't done. Although the Center for American Progress, which was the one that sort of was around Barack Obama, worked on some of this, but it also incorporates a job bank. So conservatives out there who want to support President Trump if he should be elected, put your name on our list and we'll vet you to see whether you're appropriately loyal to President Trump, because personnel is policy. If I have my people in the right places, they will execute on the policies the way I think they should be executed. Now, I could certainly argue that if the president hires, I think, about 4,000 people, if you can find 4,000 people that are going to agree with Charlie Copeland every lockstep of the day, first of all, Charlie Copeland doesn't agree with Charlie Copeland every lockstep of the day. So I think that's probably a little bit of an overshoot.
But there have been governments that have been formed under that idea.
Absolutely. And so that's a piece of it. There's another piece of it that is the training of, okay, we want you, when you show up at your job, to know what to do. So you sign up on the list. we vet you, we train you so that when you show up in the department, in HUD or Department of Education or the Department of Defense or General Services Administration, wherever it is, that you're hitting the ground on day one. You're not going to who's working for me and how do I get them to not do what we don't want them to do and to get them to do what we want to do. And so that's probably a step beyond what most think tanks do. I would submit that there are some on the left and of course Heritage on the right that have done that. And when it came to, say, Supreme Court nominations, the Federalist Society in 2016 had a list of, here are judges and attorneys that we've vetted and looked at, and we think they would make good district court judges. And so that was queued up and ready, and that was, for somebody on the center right, Trump's biggest success. But what you are finding...
So one of his biggest successes was having conservative judges appointed to the Supreme Court.
And the lower courts.
And the lower courts.
And in some ways, the lower courts may be as important as the Supreme Court. Certainly the Supreme Court is very important, but having these lower court justices that are going to make the decisions at the circuit court level and things like that, so those decisions may never get to the Supreme Court. They may never get challenged. Who knows, right? But and so I think this is somewhat modeled off of that, but a much broader. And I understand. And by the way, the Heritage Foundation changed somewhat dramatically about 4 or 5 years ago to sort of a national conservative movement, and that's somewhat ill-defined, but it's a lot stauncher, sort of a Fortress America kind of let's go back to the good old days. And by the way, while we complain
Make America Great Again type of good old days?
Well, yeah. I thought the Reagan years were pretty good, and the 90s were pretty good, and Bill Clinton ran the show back in the 90s. His foreign policy had a little issues, but his economic policy was pretty solid. And by the way, if you look at GDP and things like that, they don't trend political parties. There have been terrible economies during Republicans and great economies during Republicans and terrible economies Democrats. Great. It really, it's a different.
What I found is it kind of goes on and off, and whomever is the next person on has to deal with it, and then it goes off, and then the next person on gets a good one.
And it's it's big.
So talking about the judges real quick, I want to go back to that
Sure.
point. Project 2025 makes it very clear about not only finding judges that have conservative ideas, but removing judges that have basically liberal ideas. And I can't support having a one-way type of judge. By that I mean having just a conservative judge or a liberal judge. There needs to be the best judge for that. And I hear you say that one of Trump's biggest, I guess, successes was from your perspective, is having a conservative court. And how can that be in this society where we're trying so hard to take in so many other things? I mean,
because the most important aspect of government,
Constitution.
Well, yes, but that and the first chapter of the U.S. Constitution and the state constitution talks about the legislature. And the legislature has more written about it in both of those than the executive branch or the judiciary. The most important function of government is handled in the legislature. If you want something changed in society, go get people elected and get bills passed and get laws passed and get the governor to sign them. And the governor
if I want my civil rights to be upheld, why would I depend on a conservative court that's more than likely not going to vote in my favor for my human rights?
I would disagree with that 100%. I don't think that the Supreme Court has made any decision since it had a conservative majority that has taken away anybody's civil rights. Can you name a civil right that you no longer have that you had 5 years ago?
I wouldn't say in the immediate, but when you're talking in this about removing judges and putting in
by
judges.
the way, you should not remove judges, nor should you stack the court.
Okay.
Right? I think our judiciary is pretty awesome. And I have been frustrated for years at some of what I would consider legislating from the bench decisions on the left. And I would be equally as disappointed and angered if I had judges that were legislating from the right. And by the way, it does happen. And I get very frustrated. There are decisions that this Supreme Court and some of the lower courts have made that were quote unquote, conservative judges that I disagreed with and said, well, that's not how I would interpret the Constitution or the state of Delaware or what have you. Mm-hmm. So and if you look at the decisions that came out at the Supreme Court over the last session, there were 2 or 3 that were conservative majorities, but almost every other one was makeup of some liberals, some conservatives. Some of the conservatives were on the dissent. Some of the liberals were on the. I mean, it does not sort of come down that, okay, these guys always feel this way and these guys always feel this way. And I think that's a great thing. And so to your point about removing judges, we shouldn't, unless somebody is non-compass.
Right.
And even that's a hard thing to tell, right?
Decides with malicious intent.
And yeah, but even that's hard to tell, because who's to say what's malicious, right? I mean, if the guy stands up there and says, "I'm doing this because I don't like you," well, okay, that's pretty obvious. But that being said, that's why we have multiple layers of check up to the Supreme Court. So I think that any talk on the right or the left about packing the court or removing justices is damaging to the country and wrongheaded, because I think our court system is, I mean, we're humans, so we make mistakes, but is one of the greatest things that makes our country so good and great.
So when we're talking about making the country great, making the country good, making the country fair, and you're making that making that known to the legal system. Project 2025 wants to remove DEI completely. Any verbiage related to racism, any verbiage related to discrimination, all of that, not just from the education in states like Florida and Texas who have put their foot down and said, no, we're not going to teach this in our schools and we're not going to do that, but to do that nationwide.
So first of all, and I'm a states' rights guy. I believe in a federal system, that meaning that states have rights and states should do most of the things. There's a function from sort of in the Western civilization canon called subsidiarity, which means that the best government to rule me is the government that is closest to me. So you start with your city, your county, your state, and your federal government. We kind of blew that apart with the income tax, because now all the money goes to Washington and money is king. So they hand the money out to the states that you're going to do this, and you don't, I'm going to take your money away. And the state's like, okay, well, our education system, part of that problem is 7% of that money comes from the federal government.
But I love states' rights when it comes to things like speeding and setting the speed limits. But when it comes to my ability to be treated as an equal, I don't really care which state that I'm in.
And that's why the 14th Amendment incorporates all of the first 10 amendments, including your right to free speech, your right to freedom. The 14th Amendment, from a conservative read, from a how was it implemented back in the 1860s, is that those rights exist for you.
But part of 2025 wants to terminate and rewrite the Constitution. So the 14th Amendment is no longer a thing.
I think our Constitution is great. I'm not going to say that.
Charlie,
I love
as a Republican, I'm giving you this. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are it's a terrible idea.
Okay.
I think the Constitution, if you want to amend the Constitution, you got to get 33 states to pass the amendment, and then you got to get majorities in both House and Senate. It's not easy to do, and it shouldn't be easy to do, because it's lasted 250 years,
right?
And almost 250 years, and we've done pretty well. We've made some mistakes along the way. We're humans. Every one of us, sometime today, made a mistake of somehow, and we have corrected them, many of them, in ways that no other country has. Other than certain Western European nations and some others that have sort of followed along. We live in a wonderful country that has a broad income and wealth that's distributed. There is inequality, but you know where there's really inequality? Cuba, where the elites have a lot and everybody else is poor.
It didn't work.
So we kind of fritter around and yell and scream at one another, and over time problems do get solved. Yeah. We get really frustrated, but they do get solved, and I think that's great.
So I think, and the people at home can kind of figure out how 2025, the document, and please feel free, Project 2025 online, take a look at it, get that information yourself, digest it. It is a 900-page read, but there are plenty of sites that kind of break it down if you can trust them. NPR is a great one where they're breaking all that stuff down. But as a Republican, and you're reading this, how much do you think, I don't know if you know President Trump at all.
I don't.
And you had the opportunity to meet him. But how much of this do you believe they're ingesting? that's part of their plan in moving forward?
So at the moment, right? So I don't know what's going to happen over the next 4 months or whatever, but at the moment, I don't think much at all. And part of the reason is they're in the middle of a campaign. And they just had the RNC, the Republican National Committee's subcommittee on the platform, the party platform. Used to be, I don't know, 100-something pages, and it had all sorts of different things. They dropped that down to 16 pages. And they said things like, abortion, that's a state's issue. That's why everybody wanted these justices on the Supreme Court, to give it back to the state legislatures so the people could say, how do I want my state to run? And by the way, Delaware, I think, is going to be a very abortion-friendly state. Not my cup of tea, but that's what the state wants. Texas is going to be less abortion-friendly. Okay. And I also think that over time, both states are going to have problems. In Delaware, in a late-term abortion, that people are going to go, oh my God, I can't believe we killed that child. And in Texas, it's going to be somebody who should have had access to abortion and didn't, and something catastrophic happened. Right. And like, oh, we can't allow that. And they're going to tighten that up. It's going to take time, 10 years, 20 years maybe, but that's how legislatures work. It's messy, it's time-consuming, but that's the right way to go. I think so. To get to your point on this, I think that the platform that the Republican Party has is much more akin to what the Trump people want to do, and the rest of some of this stuff is a little bit of noise in the background that may become more important as you get closer to either the election or, should he be victorious, post-election, where he goes, oh, now I have to fill those 4,000 positions. And what do I want to do in those 4,000? And who's going to run the transition team to select those things? I think then it becomes a much more important issue.
Some of this is eerily similar to things that former President Trump has said in public. And that is, like, one of the last things they said is, this will cause a civil war if it's not followed. Also, they've made mention that,
and by the way, that's just silly.
There will be no bloodshed if they go along with it. President Trump did not say anything close to that, but he made it clear on how the actions of certain groups would be if the election was contested, and so on and so forth. Very similar ideas here.
I'm not here to defend the hyperbole that President Trump.
You're the only Republican here. You have no choice.
Well, no, I do have a choice because not all of us were lockstep. Trump is our guy, right? That being said, he's now the nominee, and so then the question is, well, what do you do about that? And there are Republicans who are, I don't like the guy, and so I'm going to stay home with my arms crossed, and because I don't think I can vote for Joe Biden. So that being said, I think that Trump in many ways is an entertainer, and he wants to be entertaining.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of these things that he says.
And has been an effective entertainer.
Oh, sure, yeah.
A very effective entertainer.
And so I think he says some of these things because it is over the top, and it gets headlines, and it gets him in, and he likes that. Not my cup of tea. I'm a much more understated kind of a guy. And as you notice, I believe in the power of the legislature, and Congress has not been doing their job, whether it's a Republican majority or a Democrat majority, for 25 years. And the state legislature in Delaware has not been doing its job similarly for a long period of time.
What were your thoughts while I have you on the state legislature? Sorry to jump.
Sure.
Some of the budget has been publicized today in regards to funding for various projects throughout the city, throughout the state. Some of that is very liberally named, and gross funds have been passed out. Do you see that as, I guess you would call it, pork belly spending? Do you see that as almost like graft?
Well, so when I was in the legislature, and again, I left in 2008, so let's put some time there, right?
So you're saying it wasn't you that approved.
Right, well, but and I voted against 5 or 6 budgets then when I was in, because I had a very simple rule, which was we shouldn't increase spending at more than population growth plus inflation. And we had higher inflation. We've still had about 1% population growth, but we've clearly spent above that. And I would say back then, this is unsustainable. Well, we're 15 years later, and they're still doing it. So at some point, you need to say, either my opinion was wrong or I'm crazy. And while some people might say two things can be true at once, clearly it was sustainable because we're still spending more money. I mean, the growth rate on spending has been phenomenal relative to population and GDP. We're spending 2 times more on a real dollar basis than we used to. I would argue that we're not getting that. We're not getting a value for that. There are more bureaucrats and more people running around filling out forms and pushing paper. And I would like somebody to come in and say, let's look at efficiency. We've got technologies and things today that can replace a lot of it, so we can free some of these people who are government employees and make them private sector employees where they can create value and more jobs. I would like to see that. But that being said, on the spending side, over the last 3 years, starting with COVID and starting, honestly, with President Trump, the federal government has just thrown money out of a helicopter. Just here's bags of money. And the state got a couple of $2 billion all in, one-time money. And that money is now being spent. Some of it's been parked, right? There's a fund down in Dover that is some of that money that's been parked off to the side that I think they'll be able to use over the next couple of years to try to feather some of this stuff out and maybe avoid tax increases. But this money is done. You're not going to get more out of the federal government, I don't believe, because
it's not there.
Well, and interest rates would go up. Inflation would go up again. You create extra money.
It's going to speed up the machine.
Right. I mean, if you think about if you have a system where there's an apple and a dollar, the apple costs $1. If I add a second dollar, now the apple costs $2. If I add another dollar, now the apple costs $3, right? And that's what inflation does, right? So as I create more money, the price of things goes up because there's more money to spend on it. And so that's very simple, and there's more complicated than that. And some people would argue that but anyway, you look at it, they threw all that money in with the infrastructure bills and all this kind of stuff, and we got inflation. And I think that they're not going to throw more money at things, and so that one-time money has come through, and there will be a day of reckoning. I think the economy in 2025 is going to be strong. Even in Delaware, I think we'll do okay. 2026, a little too far out to really say, but I think it'll be okay. But come 27, who knows? I mean, again, it's a long way away, but it is a business cycle, and if you've got a couple of good years, chances are, especially if you don't have the Federal Reserve no longer has the ability to play with some spigots, because if they put more money in, interest, inflation's already at 3.5%, which is
it's 3% as of 2 days ago,
which
right?
is 50% higher.
Inflation was 3%. I'm sorry, as of yesterday.
And that is inflation today. So it doesn't include the fact that prices are up 40% over the last 3 years. So everything's already 40% higher. And people say, 3% doesn't sound like a lot. Well, versus 2%, that's a 50% increase. So your money's decreasing in worth 50% more every year when you're at 3% than when you're at 2%. And over 4 or 5 years, it starts to count up a lot.
It does. So my conspiracy theory, Kerwin's conspiracy theory, is that
I like that.
Kerwin's conspiracy. That we are going to find that the interest rates will be lowered very close to the election or after the election. Your thoughts on that?
I don't think that they will. And I think there are people that would like that. And by the way, Donald Trump would love nothing better than in December the Fed to come out and say we're lowering interest rates by 1% or a quarter point or whatever.
You're trying to say that Donald Trump has already won the election when you make a comment like
that. I think Joe Biden would like the same thing, right? Either one would, because lower interest rates means that people maybe buy things because they're more affordable, because of the debt they have to cover for it, whatever. Bottom line is, and by the way, the out of the 7 battleground states, 3 of them are pretty solidly in Trump's thing now. So there are only 4 battleground states left, and all of them are leaning Trump. Doesn't mean that he's going to win.
It's not over.
It's not. Absolutely. There's 4 months.
But he's still a felon.
And actually,
until he can pardon himself. He can pardon himself
until he's sentenced. Not in New York, because that's a state. And until he's sentenced, he's actually not technically.
Isn't that sad that we have to come to the technicality of whether or not?
I'm not going to argue whether the 34 charges were legit or not.
They were legit. He was charged.
Well, I can charge. I'm sure.
Even if it was just one, it still makes you a felon.
Today? Did you speed today?
Absolutely, and I'm going to speed tonight.
So
but not to when I become a felon. I'm not going to go to that. Even though it was 34 charges, and let's just say,
anyway,
you know what? No, we're here now. We're here. Just because he was charged 34 times, you're saying all of those counts won't stick, but even though they did stick in the court of law, even if he was charged one time, He's still a felon. And how sad is it right now that our presidential nominee, we have to make concessions in our verbiage and how we describe him, and we just can't say that he's a felon.
You know, Iran eliminates hundreds of candidates for their races because they don't fit their specific bill that they want on the ballot. That's an elite thing. Look, I've already said I am not going to be here and just to defend Donald Trump to the hilt because I don't think he's.
Can you defend him?
So from an intellectual perspective, I absolutely could. I'm not going to
effectively
because I think there are better candidates. You know, out of 330 million Americans, if I take away 100 million because they're under the age of 18,
right,
that leaves me 230 million Americans. I think there are 229,999,997 better people that could be president of the United States than the likely
two candidates that we have today.
Agreed.
So from a Republican side, I'll tell you from a Democratic side, and I haven't said it on the air. 2 weeks ago, there was was it 2 weeks ago was the debate?
It's 2-3 weeks ago, somewhere
3 weeks ago.
How time flies.
Our president and our presidential nominee, past president, met and had a debate. Our president, current president, had many gaffes.
Those weren't gaffes.
He had many gaffes in his presentation.
Let's be honest. These were mental lapses for an old man who is aged.
Mental lapses for an old man that is aged.
In other words,
there's no other word.
Just like this afternoon when he was introducing President Zelensky from Ukraine and he called him President Putin. That is not a mistake that either you nor I would make. That's not a gaffe. That is a mental lapse from an old man who is aged.
Okay, so that being said, when they're there at the end of the debate, you're sitting back in your chair. Do you think, God, I'm proud to be an American right now?
I do not.
Do you think I'm proud to be a Republican right now?
By the way, I always, let me rephrase that. I always am proud to be an American.
Fair point.
I might be embarrassed once in a while, but I'm always proud.
Okay. So you're sitting back in your chair. You may be looking at your partner or spouse like, did you just see that? Do you feel that you're proud? Like, I wasn't saying, damn, I wish I was a Republican. And
no, but I was saying, thank God I'm not a Democrat.
I'll give you that one. That was good. That was good, Sean. But do you look at it and say, to your point, to all of our points, this is the best we have? They're arguing over golf handicaps. Both of them are
one of the most embarrassing moments, and the fact that no news media is talking about. You know, first of all, when Joe Biden says, "Oh, when I was vice president, I got my handicap down to 6," well, that means you were working real damn hard.
Yeah,
right? I'm glad we had you as vice president. You're out there on the links every day getting your handicap down. And no, that was childish. Mm-hmm. We have serious problems facing the country. We've got a war in Europe. We've got a potential war between China and Taiwan. We've got the Iranians who are paying people to kill Israelis and Israelis who are responding in a way that are killing other innocent civilians. And by the way, they've been doing it for 10,000 years, so I don't think that any of us are going to solve this.
It's just never been as televised as it is right now.
Correct, absolutely. And we all should know the phrase war is hell, because it is. Innocent people get killed, and that's why there has never been a recorded time where a liberal democracy like the United States has gone to war against another liberal democracy. So that's another benefit for democracies and capitalism is we don't tend to go to war against one another because we got better ways to resolve our conflicts. We can sit down and talk about it. And we have people that vote. Even Franklin Roosevelt couldn't get the country to go to war against Germany and Japan until we were attacked. Why? Because parents like me looked at our children and said, why should they go and die in Europe and Asia?
Right.
And so it's very hard, and it should be. And the Iraq War, we never had a vote to go to war. The Congress authorized the use of force, which was a childish way of getting out of accountability, because Iraq was a war of choice, and we lost a lot of American treasure in young men, young women, and equipment and everything else. For what? And so, if you want to talk about Project 2025 and endless wars, I certainly think that that's where the legislature has to do their job, which is, if we are going to send my children into harm's way, or your children, or your nieces or nephews, or your whatever, my congressperson and senators better hold accountability and say, I said we should do that.
So don't you feel, and I'm sure that you do, that we as an American government have an obligation to set ourselves apart from every other nation because they depend on our democracy?
Because we are exceptional.
We are not only exceptional, but we are, I guess you would say, the driving force for so many other countries.
Yeah.
The protection.
Absolutely.
We drive NATO. We drive so many other organizations that protect the world.
Costa Rica has no military. Why? Because the United States is there.
The Navy is there.
Big Coast Guard cutters down there.
Right.
And so Nicaragua was like, I'm not going to go mess with Costa Rica because,
So when we have displays like what we did 3 weeks ago in a debate, and we're both sitting on both sides of the aisle, I was not comfortable as an American feeling as though we demonstrated our superiority.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. We have, and by the way, it's not just Biden and Trump.
No.
Our legislatures,
is a mess.
When CNN and Fox and MSNBC and these others put broadcast studios on the rotunda, so when Congress gets out of session, the most dangerous place to be is standing in front of one of those places. All these elected officials, these senators and congresspeople, go running to get on TV because they want to get their soundbite in.
Right.
Every time Marjorie Taylor Greene says something stupid, which is all the time, she makes hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And people send her $3.
Right.
Every time AOC says something stupid, which is all the time, she makes a ton of money. And that's how the system is working right now. And people like you and me go, I don't really want to be involved in that.
I don't, and I find that to be more dangerous, if not as dangerous, as documentation like this.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We weren't supposed to, Charlie.
Yeah.
You were supposed to be on the other side. We weren't supposed to agree.
Because you and I might disagree on a policy initiative, but we want to have the discussion.
Right.
Because I might be wrong, or you might be wrong, or maybe there's an answer in the middle that gets us even a better answer. Or maybe, we're both getting half a loaf and so it's not so efficient, but hey, at least we're moving the ball down the field. Right now, we're not doing any of those things. We could solve the border issue. It's tough and it's never going to be 100%, but we could say, let's put a wall here and let's put some other people here and let's increase the number of people we let in for these reasons and set up the places for them in their countries where they can come and apply to that. And you could get rid of 80% of the problem.
Yeah.
But we're not going to do that because right now it's better to fight one another, because then I can go on Fox and you can go on CNN and we can talk about how terrible the other person is and people start sending us money.
But the other part to that is, I have two parts to that. Whenever you jumped on immigration, so we're going to go there, right? So my first part is, I'm a little bit more nationalist than what people think that I am. So when you go to other countries, like I have for work for Jordan and Dubai and everything, they are very clear that you are not a citizen here. God forbid you sneak in, because the consequence is amazing. You can't get a job here. If your spouse is working, they're here on a permit. You're not here on a permit. You can't leave unless you pay your last debt. All that's checked out beforehand. You can't take advantage of any type of state resource other than medical. And you're only here for a certain period of time.
Yep.
And it's very effective. You don't feel like you're out of place. You feel like you have a set of rules and you have to stick by them while you're there, right?
Yep.
Unfortunately, we haven't figured that out
Right.
to be able to implement that effectively in the United States. But at the same time, we are in this weird employment resource pickle where we don't have enough people to do certain kinds of jobs. We need more people to do this types of jobs. Where are the work permits, like the real permits to get these things done, create something similar like that, and make those things? I find it very hard to believe that no one down there can get that right.
Right. And again, they can, but they choose not to because they've built a system, and we can get into campaign finance and primaries and all this kind of stuff, but we've put together a system that promotes the incumbent, right? So for the first 150 years, people serve for 2-3 terms, maybe. I mean, you get a person every now and again, like a Daniel Webster or something like that serves like 10 or 11 terms or whatever it is. Of course, they tended to die in their 50s and 60s, so that also eliminated some. Yeah. But I mean, and even at the local level. So if you go down to Dover and you go up the stairs, and there are those plaques that for tenure of legislators, and if you look, you'll see the first 150 years or whatever it is, and you'll see 20, 30 names that served 10 or more years or 20 or more years. I forget what the number is. And then you look at from like 1980 to today, it's the same number, right? So somewhere in the 70s and 80s, we changed our election system to where the incumbent just gets reelected. Once in a while, one gets thrown out, but 95, 98% of the time, the incumbent wins. The incumbent raises all the money for themselves. They put together PACs where the money's dark money off to the side. And this is at the state level, it's at the federal level. And so you've got a political class that is walled off from accountability. And so we have presidents come in, they issue a bunch of executive orders to unwind what the guy before him did. And so now we all jump over to this side, and we all jump over to this side, and none of it's permanent, as opposed to the way our government is designed to work is the legislature sits down, makes the sausage, cooks the sausage, and hands it to the president and says, this is what you're going to execute. And the president can say, no, I'm not, I'm vetoing that. And then the legislature can go back and say, well, I'm going to get the votes to override that, or we're going to come back with a different solution. As opposed to, well, the president every day just gets out the pen and writes the next rule that can be unwound, or goes to court, and the court says, no, you can't do that because you don't have the authority or whatever. I mean, and so we're in a situation where our legislators have large numbers of them that are not serious, that they're there to make money for re-election, and they can go on boondoggles and get on TV and blah, blah, blah.
Re-election.
Sure.
Governor's race here in the state of Delaware. How are you seeing it end?
So that is an awesome question, Kerwin, and let me tell you this. It really, there are more Democrats in Newcastle County than Republicans statewide. So whoever wins the Democrat primary I mean, unless something funky happens, and certainly with Joe Biden and maybe people not showing up to vote. Let's say that Joe Biden steps out and the Democrats choose Gavin Newsom. Well, that might squelch a lot of vote in Delaware. The African American community might be like, well, we're not going to go vote. The heck with that. And then a Republican might win, right?
I think that's a stretch, though, saying that we won't vote.
I don't disagree. I'm just laying out if you look between 2012 and 2014, turnout in the city, Wilmington dropped significantly between those two elections. And that's because in 2014, you didn't need to protect Obama anymore.
Right.
And so they did drop. Now, I don't know that happens in 2024. People, I never am one to, but I guess my point is that
Trump's agenda trumps people sitting at home as a Democrat.
And right. And so and I would agree with that. And so in Delaware, we don't have gubernatorial races anymore. We don't have Newcastle County executive races anymore. We barely have mayoral races in the city of Wilmington anymore. And the reason is because the presidential race, all those elections are during presidential years, and they suck all the oxygen out of the room. If you look at New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Massachusetts,
2 years
New York,
prior to.
or Virginia, they all have non-presidential year gubernatorial elections. So you actually have an opportunity to talk about, why is our education system so bad? Nobody's talking about that because Joe Biden's got dementia and Orange Man bad, right? And so we're not talking about the fact that kids in your neighborhood, your kids themselves, may be in schools where only 1 out of 10 kids is proficient. And we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the fact that Delaware had the worst economy in the nation last year. We're not talking about how is DelDOT doing with the roads and why are we spending them all this money and they miss this or that. We're not talking about how are we doing with the landfill. Are we still operating that the way we should? What about the port? We've spent a ton of money and had all sorts of deals with the port.
I have a lot of port questions, and they just received how many?
And we will not talk about it,
$71 million?
and no one will pay any attention to it because
$71 million gift. It was a gift from the state.
Yeah.
It was a gift from the state I was given.
Wouldn't you like to get a piece of that action?
That would be very nice.
I sometimes tell some of my friends, it's like, I wish I was as unethical as some other people.
I haven't even heard of that.
Because no one's talking, because the president's got dementia and Orange Man bad. And that is the only conversation that we're having, despite the fact that in the real scheme of things, how our schools are doing, how our roads are doing, how the drugs are doing, how healthcare is doing, are much, much, much more important issues.
So you can't get out of it. Who's going to win?
Who's going to win what?
The gubernatorial election.
Oh, gosh, I have no idea. It's way too soon to tell.
You think it's too soon?
I do.
Do you believe that one candidate has more momentum than another?
From my Republican position?
You only have one choice. You only have
no.
He has all the Republican momentum.
Actually, there is another candidate.
That's right. He just didn't show up to the debate. Yeah. But are you seeing a front runner in your mind?
So I've always wondered what lane Colin O'Mara really thought he had. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really know why he got in, other than he obviously thinks he has a lane. I think they're kind of two lanes, and Bethany Hall-Long's in one of them, and Matt Myers in the other. And I think it's going to be an interesting show. I don't know that I have any way. And by the way, even if I had an answer for you, if you look at my track record, whatever I said would have a higher probability of being wrong than being right. So you might want to bet the other way.
The mayoral race in Wilmington has been very popular, we'll say, right? We have someone who was governor, who is currently the governor, actually going after the mayor's race. What do you make of that? How do you see that turning out?
I think that the governor has the inside track on that, and I think that he'd do a good job. My ultimate problem with this, and there's some things going on in the city that are good. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, but when the state itself has such a poor economy and our schools are so bad, those are the trends that will dominate the city over the next 20 years. And in the 1950s, there were 150,000 people that lived in the city of Wilmington. Today, there are about 72. Mm-hmm. And the income level of many of those folks are lower on a sort of consistent dollar basis than they were back then, because the manufacturing jobs that were here in the city and things like that are gone now.
And DuPont.
And absolutely, yeah. No, it's a horrible thing, right? And personally, extremely frustrating. Don't get me wrong, because I'm a very growth-minded, optimistic person, as you can kind of tell. And when I see sort of a focus on retrenchment and well, we can't do anything about this, so let's just build a wall here to sort of stop the tide from going out, as opposed to, why don't we build growth, and so we can get on boats and then we can ride with the tide. Right. It's just a different mindset. And I'm afraid that and by the way, John Carney is an amazingly decent human being, and I think we're lucky that a decent person like that has done the things that he has. I don't think he's a visionary, and I don't think he's particularly creative in that regard. But in managing the state, I think he's done a nominal job. And there are lots of things that I would have done differently. Certainly, the money that he got from the federal government because of COVID, I would have handled very, very differently.
I think everybody. I think that if you had to get 5 leaders from state and municipalities and large states and municipalities around the table, fed them enough bourbon, I think they would all say, I could have done a little better with that one. But I mean, those times were unprecedented. Sure. And people just did what they could.
Right. But if you handed me $2 billion and said, here, to take this and do with your state that you want, or $1.5 billion or $1 billion, whatever, and I think there were some really sort of visionary things that you could have done that 50 years from now we would look back and go,
I'm glad he did it.
wow, that's very different.
I'm glad they
right?
pushed that. I'm glad they did.
You know, you go to the national parks and you say, and again, I'm a small government guy, but Franklin Roosevelt spent a ton of money to build national parks, and every year millions of Americans go to national parks, and they're wonderful.
And they're in awe still.
And by the way, that really changed my opinion on what are things that you should do in government, and one of those things is protect open spaces. And by the way, beautiful buildings. Our courthouse is not a beautiful building.
The new courthouse
is not a beautiful building.
It's not a beautiful building.
And the statuary in front of it is not beautiful. And we could do better. But that being said, I think he's a very competent manager, and I think he will competently manage the city. Whether you see visionary growth come out as a result of it, I would highly doubt that.
You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here. Mr. Copeland, thank you so much for being a guest here on the agenda. I hope that you come back and see us real soon. It was fun.
Anytime you'll let me, I can be here.
Charlie, it's been great. And it's been great with you too. Thank you for joining us this week here on the agenda. We look forward to seeing you next week. I've told you this season is something great. See you next week.